On the podcast today, we're going to speak about the evolution of perception. So this process our consciousness goes through to see intrinsic order within chaos, no matter what chaos that is. And there's a lot to unpack in that. We'll have to explore some of the occult in relation to Eastern spirituality. We'll have to explore Freemasonry, symbology, and since it's that time of the year, we'll have to explore esoteric Christianity and the life of Jesus somewhat, a little bit, and even if Jesus lived in India. And the reason why we'll speak about that is because Christianity's relation to Hinduism and Buddhism. But we're not going to get into that straight away. We're going to start off with obviously talking about the evolution of perception. So what that basically is basically once someone has gone through a lot of spiritual cultivation, a lot of realization, you begin to see naturally harmony within chaos. It's kind of like, if I always use this analogy in my books where you have like a city, right? And when you're on the city level, it's all chaos, right? There's people going everywhere, cars, horns, beep, 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 beep. But then when you go over with a plane, you look over and there's like this rhythm, this harmony with the city, right? And the cars are moving in at a certain time of the day, they're moving out at a certain time of the day. So from an elevated perspective, there's natural harmony. And so that's the difference between, what I spoke about in my book, The Science and Practice of Humility, between a sage and a warrior, right? A warrior is on the ground fighting for their rights and this and that, while a sage is untouched on the mountains. And as Richard Wilhelm says in the I Ching, that sage doing that is actually the one creating incomparable human values for the future, while the warrior is just, it's kind of just changing the parts of an engine, but not giving the whole engine a complete overhaul, which is what the sage is actually doing.
Yeah, it's a very important concept to understand in individuals' spiritual journey, isn't it? And actually, I think there's a lot more than just trying to sing a harmony within the chaos. It's much more science to it, I believe. It's a physical, mental, spiritual realm, and we need to understand each levels of those three, physical, mental, and spiritual. And once we understand those three levels of consciousness thoroughly, then we get to understand what it truly means to be able to see harmony in the chaos.
In the chaos, yeah.
Not just simply... just seeing order in the chaos.
Yeah. Well, once you abide in that sort of spiritual plane, then the mental plane and the physical plane come into kind of like a sense of unison and harmony. And from that localization of consciousness, the reality is, shanti,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, once you get to that level of understanding, you don't need to kind of try to see the harmony within the chaos. It's just that becomes your perception.
Yeah, because that's the real reality,
yes.
Right? But the thing is that we're out on the outer layer. We're in the material realm, in the physical plane, and we abide out in the physical plane, and we think that we're separate bodies, and there's this whole thing with identity politics, which keeps us at such a low level of consciousness, which keeps us in a state of fight or flight, and then that's our reality. So when you speak to someone about the intrinsic harmony within chaos, and there's an order within chaos, and so forth and so on, they think you're crazy. They might even stab you or something nuts like that, because they've completely lost in their own version of the world. But that's because they're on the outer layer, in the physical plane.
I mean, definitely that like a absolute truth of reality, which is a pure consciousness, exists in the physical and mental plane as well. But we'll only be able to see it that way when we get to the elevated level of spiritual perception. Otherwise, I mean, most of us in the world see the reality from purely physical and mental perspective, right? Like physical form and the mental, very intellectual level of understanding things, which includes separation and but a lot of personal agendas and opinions and things like that. And so these are superficialities, right? And we often judge things just based upon those standards, but yeah, we need to be able to see that the spiritual realm, to be able to see that ultimate truth within physical and mental planes.
Exactly. Yeah, so we have to really get out of that. Well, you and I talk about this on the podcast all the time. We've got to get out of that sense of duality, right? Like I speak about it in the Science and Practice of Humility, how it's a hypnosis duality, right? It's this program that we have running on in our mind from this dualistic state. And that comes, like you said, from the physical and mental plane, because from a physical and mental perspective, life is, in some sense, dualistic, because, we are still an ego living in the world, and, obviously you need to take a shower and take care of your health and this and that. But then it extends further out where we enlarge our ego and we associate with certain things, which then begins to cause friction with other egos, and then, we have conflict in the world, right? So the spiritual process of elevating your perception into the spiritual plane and seeing reality as it truly is fundamental in esotericism, right? Especially in Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and also, obviously, within Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism. You're supposed to get out of this engaged state with the world. That you're only in an engaged state because your mind is fixed on certain ideas and beliefs and agendas you have and you hold dear to yourself in air quotes, and then that creates, conflict. But at an elevated state, there's no, you're shanti. It's like I said with Richard Wilhelm, you're creating incomparable human values for the future, essentially by doing nothing, because you've understood reality. There's no such thing as peace through war and all of these, idiotic slogans we create that are contradictory. You have to really cleanse out your system, your vasanas, your samskaras, and come back to that elevated perspective.
Yeah, often what people misunderstand is that I think being a sage or become a sincere and spiritual practitioner or something like that, and people often just judge them like, what are they doing? Like they just sit in a mountain or cave and doing nothing, and like that's not very human. But so then okay, if you think that these people need to do something to, let's say, change the world or to try to make the world a better place and whatnot, okay, so what kind of agenda behind that to do that? What, according to what kind of ideas you're gonna go out and do these things? Then then you need to look more into yourself, and also what triggered that sort of thinking as well.
Yeah, it's their own agenda, it's their own beliefs, it's all of that, right? So then, again, when you pull the carpet out from people and you explain that to them, they think that life is meaningless then, right? Because they think that life needs to have meaning, and life doesn't need to have meaning. Life, it's the meaning you give to life that is the thing, but you still don't even need that, right? You can completely renounce that as well. So if you have your agendas and your beliefs and you're going around telling a sage, for example, you need to get engaged, it's kind of ridiculous, because they've already understood why we exist. They already understood why we exist. And it's not in fighting and conflict and promoting their own agenda. We're not salesmen. We're all not salesmen. We're all going around selling our belief system and our way of thinking upon each other. And that's causing extreme conflict. And so we've got to get out of that mindset, right? And so that was what the whole spiritual process is in, especially Eastern spirituality. And so that's where, like, this evolution of perception, when we look at that and we have a look at it from the perspective of the chakras, right? So we had a whole podcast on the chakras for those who haven't listened or watched that one. Really good for any of you. And so you have this process of this journey from the root chakra to the crown chakra. And as we explained that the chakra podcast, that we're not talking about the kundalini in the sense of you explode, and I mean that's kind of a little new agey, and that's really, when you speak about that to authentic Hindus, and that they kind of cringe, because that's like a foreign entity, that idea. Whereas like the Kundalini truly rising through the chakras is this sense of this, some of the higher psychological centers beginning to open up, and then you becoming this full-fledged human being, as sort of like what Sadhguru talks about, this full-fledged human being, where when the crown chakra completely opens, then you have that elevated, that's from the spiritual plane, you have that elevated perception, where you could see order within chaos, and we'll get to that slogan in a minute. But to explain that, like, so the Kundalini has to go on a journey, right? And where does the Kundalini energy go through? It goes through the spine. It's related to the spine. And so what's the spine made out of? 33 vertebrae, right? And so 33 becomes an important symbolism in the evolution of perception within the East and also within Western esotericism. And so you have this evolution of the Kundalini rising through the chakras, through the 33 stages, not in an instant, but like through a slow process of like your own spiritual process, and then your crown chakra is fully open. And the crown actually is an important symbol too, right? And especially in Western esotericism. The actual, like a king or queen's crown we're talking about here, not the crown chakra. Yeah, so, and that's why that spiritual knowledge lends into what we're talking about, the evolution of perception, right? So
yeah, I mean, again, like that coincide with the highest initiate degrees in Freemason, 33 degrees. Yeah, 33 degrees, and there's very symbolic and very, I wouldn't say it's coincidence. It's a very interesting, metaphors goes into all this esotericism. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, that's, if you look at it, that's probably where, and this is what I was talking about earlier, it's probably where Freemasonry and Christianity got a lot of these ideas, especially and related to 33, because 33 is related to the 33 vertebrae of the spine, with the journey from the root chakra to the crown chakra, in a sense of evolution of perception. And when we're talking about Freemasonry here, we're talking about the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, so like the dons of Freemasonry. So usually only the elitists, and air quotes here, again, not saying that any of those people are very wise or this and that, but we don't really know, because we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. But their knowledge is, it is related to especially Eastern spirituality and also Hermeticism and Gnosticism. And so you have this evolution of stages of understanding you got to go through, right, to get to the 33rd degree of Freemasonry. And this, in the symbology of that, if you look at the symbols of the 33 Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, there's something that comes, we just mentioned it before, but there's a slogan that comes in tandem with that, and that's the Latin proverb, ordo ab chaos, and right, so in English, order out of chaos. Now, a lot of people assume, conspiracy theorists, assume that this means we create order, we create chaos to bring our version of order. The Masons' version of order. But what it really means is it's in relation to what we're talking about, the evolution of perception from a deeper level. So what you get in the 33rd degree of Freemasonry, this is the topic of conversation, is if you have that elevated state of perception that the mystics had, right? I don't know if you can get it kind of in a Freemason temple with your little apron and stuff like that, but that's another story. So then you have this you can see order in chaos.
Chaos, yes.
That's the evolution of perception, and that's the deeper knowledge in Freemasonry.
Yeah.
Which is related to, obviously the chakra system, which is what we're talking about, and so forth and so on.
And another connection with Jesus is that age 33, when he was age 33, that he crucified and then resurrected. And it's just crazy how much in connection there are.
Yeah. It is really crazy, right? Because that mythology there in Christianity is so connected to, so related actually to Hinduism and Buddhism especially, right? And not to mention Freemasonry, what we were just talking about. So, and since Christmas is coming for people, we thought it would be a good idea to talk about a little bit about that, because that as you said, there's a little bit of dispute, right, between some sects of Christianity about how old Jesus was when he died and was resurrected. But in general, there's 33 is the go-to in the Bible. And so there's this 33 years, so to speak, and then the person dies and is resurrected as Christ, right? Yeah. Christ consciousness, yeah. Which, you know, a lot of people talk about this. Paramahansa Yogananda talked about this too, where it's, if you look at Christ consciousness, it's so much related to the idea of Krishna consciousness. So, Krishna. Yeah, Krishna. So like when you look at the story in the Bhagavad Gita and then you look at the Bible, there's a lot of parallels with the story. You know, obviously, there's a lot of differences, but there are some parallels. I shouldn't say a lot. I should say there's some parallels. The only problem with Yogananda mentioning something like that is Yogananda kind of made it out that Jesus was he was practicing Kriya Yoga, so it's kind of leaning into their own tradition. We'll talk about that in a second, but yeah, that's important, right? Like, so you have that 33. Again, in relation to Freemasonry and the chakra system, you have that 33 levels or 33 years of Christ until there's that state of Christ consciousness, enlightenment, resurrection. So again, the resurrection is from a mythological and spiritual perspective is more of the death and rebirth of the death of the jiva and the rebirth of the atman, right? It's not the death of an actual physical body and then the physical body comes out. I mean, it's not a movie.
Yeah, it's to be understood as more like a mythology, isn't it? And what really represents the whole story is, right? And I think that's a very interesting that aligns with how the solar system works around the Christmas time too. Like, so 25th of December is when the sun lays the lowest in the northern hemisphere, right?
Yeah. Well, it's around, I think, solstice is like 22nd and 25th.
Yeah.
So 25th is when it begins to rise.
Oh, yeah.
Resurrect.
That's when it...
resurrect.
That's when the sun starts to rise up, right?
Yep.
So that's, I mean, like exactly going parallel with that, the crucified and resurrection story, right?
Yeah.
Again, like when I heard that story, it's like it's much more expansive whole frame of a story than literally what Bible really tells you.
Yes.
The story of Christ, right?
Yeah.
Like, and again, like there maybe too many people who believes in Christianity believes that story to kind of literal term.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were to understand there's other things, it's so fascinating.
Well, the thing is, and you and I know this personally, we've mentioned it on the podcast, is that when you understand a lot of the traditions from a mythological perspective, and you understand that they're not literal, it's at an even deeper level.
Yes.
Because at a literal level, it's just literal. I mean, it's almost at a materialist level, because you're just taking it as a story on face value. You're not understanding the deepness of the story.
And I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people kind of turn back to the Christianity and they're giving like bad name to it. Yeah, because maybe too many people believe in that like, literal story.
Yeah. Well, Joseph Campbell did a great job with mythology, with Christianity, and then again he was ridiculed for being anti-Christian and stuff like that. But I mean, him explaining the mythology is actually in support of Christianity, supporting it. Even though he's saying that the story is not like I will say here, no one walked on water, but the story has the deeper messages in the mythology is in what it means and in the symbology, and so what it means to the human experience. What is this Christ consciousness, the Christos? What is this? And so. And there's so much in esotericism about that, especially the Gnostics. The Gnostics speak about that, and anyone who is not familiar with Gnosticism, I highly recommend going out and reading anything by Samuel Envoyeur. I mean, you don't have to agree with everything Samuel says, but I mean, he was a very intelligent guy, and knew a lot about esoteric Christianity, Gnosticism specifically. And so, yeah, so I think that we got to get out of that, right? Like I know that especially in India, some Hindus get mad at mythologists and that because they want to think that the stories are literal, like Hanuman's flying over to Sri Lanka and all of these things. You know what I mean? Like, but the stories are understood at a deeper level when you understand the mythology, and the science of that, and the science of the spiritual scriptures is that it has a meaning for people always, at all times, right? Which is the genius of them. And those sages and rishis and that who wrote those texts back in the day were far beyond anyone in the modern day, because the stories in that have a spiritual significance, like I said, for all times, not just like in that period of time.
No, once we get to understand the mythology of it, it's kind of universal and it's timeless, isn't it? Like, and back in those days, the solar system, and then right now, 2,000, 2,500 years later, it's still the same, which applies to until today.
Exactly. And that's the genius of it. And, it's... we got to get out of that mentality that the stories need to be literal. We got to just got to get out of that mentality, because you can read, like you said, people will get turned away with like any sort of religious scripture and that when they start reading it, and if they don't understand the mythology and they don't understand the kind of the principles and the tenets of the tradition, then they will begin to walk away.
Like Jesus walked on water and things like that. To me, it sounds like more like a representation of this Christ consciousness, the pure consciousness, like reflects on water or something like that.
I mean, there's a lot of things you can say.
Just that Christ consciousness self is what the story wants to tell you. It's not a man walked on water.
No. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, yeah, but he may have had siddhis and this and that." And it's like, no, come on, maybe, right? But like, let's not get carried away, because if you understand the mythology, then you understand it at a deeper level, and it means more. We know Christians who have understood it at the mythological perspective, who then understand it at a deeper spiritual perspective, and it means more to them to be Christian, and as a consequence has opened them up to other traditions, because obviously it piques their curiosity, to explore other traditions.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, like even in the Bible, there's a strong. It seems like there's strong influence by Hinduism and Buddhism as well, so that you get to see all these things like a more holistic philosophy.
Yes. Yes. And so, in saying that, we have to talk about, in relation, just briefly, since it is that time of the year for people, that the sort of the 18 hidden years of Jesus, like how could 33 and these things become part of, like even if we look at some of the Nag Hammadi texts, right, the lost scrolls, the lost teachings of Jesus and this and that, and you have phrases in that, I am that I am. So that is classical Hinduism. I am that I am, right? So the I am here being the Atman, being the self. I am that I am doesn't make sense from a Christian perspective, unless you're saying I am is God, right? And also we have also in John 1:1, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right?
Yeah.
So what are we talking about here? The Word being Om, right? I mean, Swami Sri Yukteswar highlighted that, right? So the word here being Om. So Amen, right? Amen, Om. There's a relationship there. And so you have these parallels, And so obviously, we don't know that in the Middle East they weren't chanting Om, or it became Amen or something like this. But there is that 18 hidden years of Christ where,
some people speculate
this,
he may enter India and study those Eastern wisdom traditions.
Yes, Well, there's speculation he was in Galilee and places like this, like just studying and stuff like that. Some Christians believe, but then there is a large portion of people who actually believe he was in South Asia, not just India. He was in Nepal and also Tibet, and he was traveling with yogis and that through the Himalayas. There are some scholars who believe that he went actually to South Asia to study the way of the Buddha, because Buddha had become such a massive figure within 500-600 years before the life of Jesus. If you believe Jesus was a historical figure, we know this through like the way that Buddhism had spread through Asia fairly quickly, right? Like there's that place in China where they went over the Himalayas, and there's in Xinjiang, right? There's
I mean, the early Buddhism was already like all through the South, India, Sri Lanka, Myanmar already, and Central Asia, all over China. And
then it likely went west as well. It was in Afghanistan and places like that. So
they found recently that whoever how old it is, like thousands of years, that Buddhist statue down under, deep down northern Afghanistan and things like that. Like wow.
So they likely could have went that way as well, right? Or the word got out through trade and stuff like that, that there was this great being in South Asia, India specifically, and that's why some scholars speculate that Jesus was influenced because he had a spiritual inclination, and so he wanted to follow that sort of path, and then that's why you do see some of this, Buddhist influence within Christianity with compassion and forgiveness, and it's in its own form, obviously, But then there's the other side of this coin where they say that he was traveling with yogis through the Himalayas and learning the ways of the mystics, and hence the 33 chakra system. I mean, the 33 vertebrae of the spine, the Kundalini, the chakra system, and the problem with a lot of that is that there's speculation too much. You know what I mean? Like. So, sometimes in places like India, people grab things and they run with it. But I'm not saying that any of that's untrue, because we don't really know. But for example, there's a place in Kashmir, right in the center of Srinagar. Actually, there's a tomb, and there's some scholars who believe that that's actually the tomb of Christ, of Jesus, where he died. He came to India and he lived his life in India, and that was it. Because there was problems in the Middle East, and he was done with that, so he came to India to follow the path of the yogis and that, and then he died in Srinagar. The problem there is that a lot of the local Muslims actually believe it was just another Muslim prophet, like a sage figure. They don't really know, but there is a tomb that's very revered with Muslims, but also Christians are going there now, foreigners are going there, under the impression that it might be Jesus, right? Because some scholars had mentioned it, and they make certain relationships to. There's a few texts, I can't remember what it is. There's a few texts, but then there's another manuscript that was a 3rd century manuscript that was found actually in the Hemis monastery, famous Hemis monastery in northern India, talking about. Actually, it's titled "The Life of Saint Isa," and so usually in South Asia, there's this knowledge of this. Saint Isa, not even saint, they just call it Isa. Like Saint Isa became later sort of because, the belief that it was Jesus. And so, and this Isa was kind of looked different to the common South Indian individual, like or a person from Tibet or Nepal. So they had different coloured skin and so forth and so on, and came from other lands, so to speak. And so there's this knowledge of Saint Isa found in this 3rd century manuscript. It was actually discovered in the 1800s. I forget by maybe I think a German found it. I can't really remember, but anyway. So they found it, and that's kind of like the biggest evidence that there was some sort of yogi from another land that came there, or a person who came to learn the paths of the yogis and the Buddhas in South Asia. And so there is that text. So that holds a little more weight than the one in Kashmir, so to speak, where people think that that's a tomb of thing. Because this is actual more so. Even actually, I shouldn't say it. Well, there are some textual evidence for the one in Kashmir, but I think there's maybe some loose connections. Whereas this manuscript in the Hemis monasteries is explaining this life of this individual, whoever that individual may have been, that came from somewhere else.
Yeah, so the text was written by someone about the Saint Isa.
About Saint Isa, yeah, and Jesus, I think in Arabic is called Isa as well, right? So ISA.
Oh wow, it's too much of a synchronicity to just say it's a coincidence.
Yeah, it's a coincidence. Yeah, so there is that, and that's really interesting. And there's a lot of not a lot. There's some books on that and some documentaries if anyone's interested in that. But that lends into what we've been talking about today. We don't want to talk too much about that, about the life of those lost 18 years. But what it does symbolize, in some sense, say if we take that story as true, right? Jesus went there. Jesus went to South Asia, India specifically, but also traveled through Nepal and Tibet, according to that text. Is that he went there to learn the ways of the mystics, the yogis and the Buddhas, and he wanted to take that knowledge back with him to his homeland. Is more of, I mean, that's probably more plausible than he stayed there and he died up in Kashmir. But that lends into what we've been talking about. Like, he wanted to understand this elevated state of perception, right? And it's probably no coincidence that the 33 years of Christ becomes sort of intertwined with the mythology behind maybe the life of the historical Jesus. A lot of people maybe don't know this, but usually, like, if there is a sage figure and this and that, sometimes grand stories can be created around them, and a mythology can be created around them, right? Happened with the Buddha as well. Especially not in early Buddhism, but later on in Mahayana Buddhism and Vajrayana, a lot of fantastic stories developed around the Buddha, but not with Theravada or those early Buddhism. Yeah. So, that lends into what we're talking about. He went there for 18 years, learned the way of the Buddha or the way of the yogis, took that back.
There is saying in Bible that art thou, like you are that, right?
And
that's what I mean. Like, and then there is a saying in Sanskrit, tatvamasi, you are that. Again, Alan Watts also emphasized this in his book and in many of his talks as well, that how much of a similarities in these wisdom traditions. That's why when I got to hear that, I'm like, oh, that's something very important and significant. Yeah.
That's a parallel you can't ignore, right? It's like the parallel, like, I am that I am. Like, those sorts of phrases are parallels you can't ignore. Like, they're so similar. Now, could two different traditions arise with similar understandings? Of course, that's plausible too. But there's other connections and things that you have to take into consideration, which we discussed, right? So, anyway, that's we wanted to mention that to lend into this idea of order out of chaos and the evolution of perception. And so, again, one of the things why Jesus' perception may have been at odds with the society he was living in was because he had this elevated state of perception where he could see that the world was God and everything was God, but everyone's operating from this low level of consciousness, on this egoic level, which is causing harmony and confusion within society. Hence, they killed him. So
definitely he was the odd in that society at that time.
Well, he's characterized as like a rebel figure, right?
Yes, that's right.
Similar to like Lao Tzu, right? Lao Tzu in Taoism, and there's not really a lot of textual knowledge on the life of Lao Tzu, but what we know is that he was some sort of scholarly librarian or academic or something like that who had just had enough of all of the Confucian BS, and he was out of town basically, and so he was like a rebel to society. Again, it comes down to this domestication of the individual, right? Like we see that in the story of Shiva and Daksha, right? Daksha is playing we talked about this last week, the Brahmanda, the socialization, the cultural aspect, while Shiva is completely liberated from the world. Not just the world, that you see, but all of the things that we create that we think are the world.
Yeah.
And here the world would be within our mind, right? So in the story of Christ, he's trying to liberate people from the prison they've built in their mind to experience the kingdom of God, which is ever present everywhere. And that's Brahman, right? The word is Om, and Om is Brahman. So
That's right.
And so once you have that elevated state of perception, then, maybe you are at the level of a teacher. But I guess that the problem with Christianity, and everyone knows this, that it becomes like a conversion religion. And then you have people running around trying to tell people about that. And they themselves don't even have that elevated state of perception. They're operating from an egoic level.
Honestly, I've never met a Christian believer who has that knowledge and says that deeper wisdom of Christianity. And most missionary people like to talk about these literal story of Bible, and that's how they want to convert people and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's why I was always skeptical about the whole things. Yeah.
And the problem is that when you're operating from that egoic level, you can be very aggressive and you have your own agenda and your beliefs. Look at it in America at the moment, where you have Christians destroying Buddhist temples and stuff like that, which is really ridiculous, right? Spraying Jesus on the Buddha and stuff like that. And, you know what the Buddhists are like? They just say, like, the conditioning's strong in a lot of people, so they follow the path of non-violence. So that aggressiveness, it's become a Western trait, unfortunately, and has infiltrated things like Christianity. And we need to re-emphasize Christianity is actually an Asiatic tradition.
Yes.
Which people forget. It's not a Western tradition.
Yeah, it came from Middle East.
So it's actually an Eastern tradition, but it became a Western tradition because it took root in Europe. Yeah. So that's we digress. That's a whole other topic. But the point is that you can't really influence the world or do anything to impact the world in a deep level. Here we're talking about like a level of the Buddha or Shankara or someone like that, or Jesus. If you have not or you don't dwell in that spiritual plane of consciousness, that elevated perception where you see the nature of Brahman and everything, you see the Tao and all, as Zhuangzi said, right? Zhuangzi's phrase about when there is no more this and that, you see the still point of the Tao, and you see the infinite, or you reside in the still point of the Tao, and you see the infinite in all things. And so that is the Zhuangzi explaining what we're talking about, that elevated state of perception where you see the intrinsic harmony within chaos. And so you got to rise above, especially now, right? Now with the situation that's happening where people are instead of working on themselves on a spiritual level, they're getting angrier and trying to be engaged more with things. And what does fear do? Fear puts you in protection mode, right? Security and protection. And what does security and protection do? It causes conflict. Because security, ironically, is a state of insecurity.
Yes.
Because you're in a state of defense against whatever you think is opposing you. And so that's one of the big problems. So you can't work on yourself on a spiritual level. So
I like the word domestication when you mentioned it, because that means to say that we are overly socialized, right? And we are domesticated. We became domesticated animals basically by social rules and regulations and all the social norms basically. And again, that creates a lot of these ideas of yourself and how the world should be, and individual opinion and agendas. All these things will only create more conflict.
Yes.
And then there is no kind of room for us to think of what the real human nature is, really, right? Like, it's over domestication, I believe, and most people in the world believe that's the way we live. That's the
way we should live.
Yeah, like humanity, should live and how it should be, but which isn't true, actually.
No.
That's what they want to believe, but that's not the truth, is it?
No, it's not. And people know that when they start, like, say when they go on a lengthy holiday, they start traveling, and they quit their job and this and that. Once you release the shackles of society on them, something else begins to transform within them, right? Like, but it's been dying to be born for their whole life. But we are in this domestication process from birth. You know, our family emphasizes to us of how we should behave and how we should be. Then education tells us how we should behave, how we should be. And then, you know, working life tells us how we should behave. The government are telling you this and that. And it's all, as Lao Tzu said, it's all warping your nature. It's making you into this aggressive person with beliefs and agendas and keeping you in a state of security. When as soon as you release that pressure valve, then life has a certain rhythm and harmony to it.
Yeah. It's interesting because all this conditioning and socialization that we believe it's good for us, right? But in the end, because that shell is too thick, that actually destroys the human nature, and it destroys our healthy psychological state, right? And we become this basically mentally ill, and I think most people in society somewhat subtly suffer from that state of mind.
Well, we've seen it now.
Yeah.
We've seen it. Just look on the news. If people watch the news, you know, we're suffering from it. And that's why, like Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi were saying, Taoism is basically just a philosophy based on producing healthy and sane individuals, because socialization is unhealthy and insane. And we've never taken that knowledge on board. Shaivism has done the same. That the whole mythology behind Shiva, the whole life of Shiva, is that the domestication process and the socialization process is destroying your nature. It's making you a beast. In trying to tame a beast, in air quotes, your animal nature, you are creating even more of a beast.
Right.
So it's only when you allow people to breathe do you allow them to live, right? And allow them to understand deeper things about themselves. You and I couldn't be doing this if we hadn't spent many years free from society. And you and I put our life in that situation. We put the work in to get there. Yeah. And so, and everyone should be doing that, actually, because that's when you begin to understand yourself at a deeper level. The socialization process warps your nature. The domestication process warps your nature. See, the thing is that from a Taoist perspective, you are human. You have that human nature in you. From the Shiva perspective, you have that human nature in you. Now, from Shiva's perspective, is we should nourish the human element of us, but the socialization aspect actually enhances our animal past. You see? So then there's no surprises. We have war and people are fighting in the streets and people are sensitive about the most ridiculous things and this and that. Because that sensitivity, again, is an act of self-defense, right? The ego's whole existence is lived in self-defense. That's what the ego is. When you got to eradicate that mentality.
Yeah, again, like we need to kind of know and trust that our human nature is good, right? Essentially, it's good instead of being a beast, like what Confucius saw and Confucian school of thought is. That once we get to trust that the human nature is fundamentally good, then no need such conditioning or the domestication by society.
No. Well, that should be our starting place. Our starting place should be emphasizing to people that human nature is fundamentally good. That should be our starting place. But we're not. That's not where we're starting from. You don't go to school and your teachers are saying that, you know, because for them, what happens then, right, is when someone behaves like erratic or they carry on and this and that, then they label that individual as being, you know, a little bit mad, a little bit crazy. So you should watch out for that person. But they are just the result of their environment. You know, maybe their home life is not so great. You know, everything. There's so many things to take into account. But we generalize everything. Oh, that person's just, he's a nutter. And it's like, but, I mean, why? You know, because first and foremost, when that individual was a baby, they were just like any other baby.
Yeah.
You know, pureness in their eye and so forth and so on. But when they're, say if they're 5, 6 or 7 and they start behaving a certain way, then that's more of a result of the environment that they're in, you know.
Yeah. And
those animal traits and enhancing that ego, those things go deep for us because that's survival mentalities. And so the path of a human being has always been nourishing the human element. And that's why the spiritual traditions came about in the first place, right? That's why Jesus Christ was emphasizing compassion and forgiveness and love and so forth and so on. And, you know, that's kind of the emphasis of all spiritual traditions, right? Like you're leaning into the wrong thing. You're leaning into self-protection, security, and you think that it's almost a petty view of life because you're living your whole life in a tense state. And people wonder why they suffer from hypertension because you're in the tense state all the time. You might not feel like you're tense in your body, but you're tense in your mind.
It's almost become at a stage where you don't feel like you're tense, but you are tense.
You are tense,
you don't, it's unrecognizable. Right?
Yeah.
That's how bad it became now.
Yeah. Well, you know this, like people we've worked with meditation and stuff like that, when you explain to them that they have a certain tension about them, and some of them don't believe you, and then you ask them, what's the position of your tongue right now? And their tongue will be pressed against their palate. And that's a sign of tension.
Yeah.
Where if you're relaxed, if the tongue is resting in the lower jaw here, that's just, you're chilled. The tongue is the energetic evidence of your tension. And it's such an unconscious thing. Like if you're sitting around today and you're thinking my tongue is stuck up.
Always, yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's been like that, like, who knows, 24/7 every day until you realize.
Until you realize, exactly. Yeah. So that's the problem, see? But then once you, again, become shanti, you feel like, oh, it's resting in my lower jaw. And this is one of the meditation, this is fundamental with just basic sitting meditation where monks and that will teach you that. Try to concentrate on where your tongue is positioned a little bit.
I think that's exactly the same as like frontal cortex.
Prefrontal cortex.
Yeah, prefrontal cortex. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, most people don't realize how much like tensed up that. That's why it's funny. Like when we get older, we get all these wrinkles in the forehead, right? That's so much tension in the front.
Yeah.
But once you do some spiritual practice, meditation and whatnot, that you realize how much tension that you always had in this frontal
in that part.
area.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That one's a tough one because the thing is that obviously you see monks and this and that, and their skin is really good on their forehead because they have no tension, and yogis and that, right? Yeah. Their skin is so good, but also there's a concentrative element that causes wrinkles in the forehead too, because a lot of concentration on something. I've experienced this as being a writer, obviously. So there's different qualities, but again, concentration can also produce tension as well. Depends on what the concentrated effort is, right? Yeah. If your concentration, if it's dharana, if it's in meditation, that's a whole different thing. But if it's concentration in the sense of you're concentrating on, you're working on a production line and you're doing this, and that produces a lot of heat and a lot of stress. Yeah. So that's going to produce wrinkles and wrinkles is not such a bad thing. It's more so about the tension that's going on in your mind that's actually breaking down your biological organism. So, and, meditation is about releasing that tension, to allow people to experience their ultimate nature. And, that's what we need to experience. And that's what actually happens from the elevated perspective, right? From the elevated perspective, there's no tension, don't exist. You also don't know you also know you're not the body, even though you're living within the body. Yeah. You know that this localization of consciousness is just like a fleeting moment, and it is kind of like a moment, right? We see it from a perspective, and again, this lends into order and chaos a little bit, or the macro and the micro, where you see your life and you think it's this long, grand thing, but from a grand perspective, like from the universal perspective, it's not even the blink of an eye. Like it's not even a grain of sand on the beach in the ocean, like it's...
Yeah, some of the things that you also mentioned in your articles and things like that, the one thing I really liked about that evolution and involution.
Yep.
So to rise above and to be able to see harmony out of chaos is to rise above and to go through that journey of evolution of perception is expanding your consciousness and involving your consciousness into these details and that ebb and flow kind of thing that's just like a breath inhale and exhale. Like, as in, once you physically, mentally get involved into your daily life and things like that, and to be able to evolution to happen is to also walk away from that involvement and rise above, and so they step back a little bit and then look at the bigger picture kind of thing, so that kind of allows your mind to expand a little bit, so that kind of a rhythm. So that kind of process also goes into going through that evolution of perception.
Yeah, it is good you mentioned that, because I forgot to mention that, like the involution and evolution, because that's like a very important part in Western esotericism, and also we have the breath of Brahma, right? The breath of Brahma from an individual level is that contraction, expansion, right? Like, so your consciousness is expanding the more you are in an evolved state of perception, as opposed to the involution of being engaged and caught in the details of life. And it is funny because when we are in an involved state, or we are in a process of involution, when we stay in a process of involution, it's a contracted state. And so you and I were talking about tension before, right? Yeah, so you're contracted. And what happens when you begin to open up? You expand your consciousness, and there's a lightness, right? Like, enlightenment can some sense be related to weight, in some sense too, right? So there's a feeling of lightness, like your consciousness is not heavy anymore. The heaviness comes from this contraction we have, where we're involved, and life sucks, and you know what I mean, like, and he said, she said, and so forth and so on. So with everything that's going on, when everyone's attracted to drama, the news, and all of that, it's keeping you in that contracted state. It's keeping you in that process of involution, and you're not evolving your state. And this lends into the spiritual practice. One of the significant spiritual practices we need to apply to actually get into that evolved state of perception is to practice the detachment, the non-attachment to like drama and that in the world, right? So we need to detach, and we need to reattach or realign to what's real, to that evolved state of perception. And you can practice this. It's not just something that is isolated to sages and this and that. You have to get familiar and familiarize your consciousness with just being shanti, and not allowing your mind to pull you into being engaged in these dramas and falling down the YouTube algorithm rabbit hole and all of these things, you know, you need to have a very focused effort in your spiritual endeavor here somewhat, because the involution aspect, it's a state of it's a magnetic pull, right? It's a magnetic pull. It's a process of energy, and it's pulling. The world is pulling your energy in because it wants your energy. Because without your energy, this won't survive. So all of this conflict that's going on won't survive if your energy is has evolved out of it. It won't survive. And so you need to starve that. You need to starve yourself of the attraction to those things, which actually will help other things, you know, become peaceful in that. So,
yeah, and when you do engage in things that you have to deal with, while you do that, you still need to have a bigger perspective of what you are doing, right? Without that idea and just doing that, it'll just get you more trapped into that loop of your reality, your normal reality, so that it blocks you to grow and elevate your perception. You know, we experience this, that even that when we do practice spiritual practices, we sometimes do get trapped back into things, right? Then we kind of forget, we completely forget, and then like much later, you're like, oh shit, I was too much trapped into these things, and but that taking is just like a kind of natural process, but we kind of need to remind ourselves that we always need to step back and allow yourself to breathe and to have that more expansive mind to look at the reality as well.
Yeah. Well, there is, as you're mentioning, there is that rhythm between involution and evolution, right? But the thing is that, like, let's just as an example, you have to go to the post office today. So that's a state of involution. Like, okay, so I need to go to the post office. I need to get this and that done. But then once you go to the post office, you get it done. Are you dwelling on, I didn't like the carpet in the post office. The air conditioning was on a little too high. No one does this, right?
Or the guy who served me didn't seem very competent at his job. Is he going to really get there?
Yeah. So usually we don't think, over-analyze, and we're not caught in the detail of our everyday activities. But in the involved state, that's actually how we should be. So, but the problem is because of our conditioning and this and that, when we are in an involved state, it becomes much more complex. And then we make up this illusion of Maya in our mind about this reality, and it doesn't exist. We
end up making it much bigger than what it actually is, right?
Yeah.
Because we overthink about things and over-dramatize things, so that actually make it much worse in your own mind than how it actually is.
Blow it out of proportion,
yes.
Totally.
We do it all the time.
Yeah. And so that's why we need to... That's why, like, when they talk about the contraction and the expansion, or the breath of Brahma, is about to reside in the expanded state more. And you only apply your mind to certain things that are necessarily to be taken care of. But you're in this constant practice of shanti, of like Abhaya Mudra, like everything's all good. I see the reality from this level. But what people will try to do is like, you should want to know this and that, but you've got to distance yourself from even them, you know, because if you're sincere about the spiritual endeavor, sometimes that means that some relationships need to be reevaluated, because some relationships can be detrimental to our spiritual growth, especially if they're people who want us to grab a picket sign and go to protests and fight the world and this and that. This is not going to be beneficial for your spiritual growth. You know, so, and again, that's agenda fueled, and it's based on a certain perspective of the world. That's not the real perspective. The real perspective is the evolved perception. It's that perception of seeing intrinsic order within chaos, so-called chaos, right?
Sure.
So look, when we look into nature from an elevated perspective has a beautiful harmony about it, a rhythm. You look at it from in a detailed level, there's ants and there's flies everywhere, and there's dead leaves, and if you're looking too closely, then you're like, oh, this is crazy. But then as soon as you look back, you're like, oh man, this is just it's a pine forest.
It's seemingly chaotic.
Yeah, seemingly chaotic, yeah.
It almost like a chaos never existed. No. We see it as chaos, right? And therefore we need to elevate our perception.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's seemingly chaotic, but it never was a chaos.
No.
Yeah.
No. Even if you look at it from geometrical patterns and from energy, from rhythm and this and that, everything's actually has an intrinsic order and harmony to it, right? Like, so the energy that came from Brahman when the Om emanated the world into existence, within everything that is a formation, that order of Brahman is within everything. That's why in Hermeticism, one of the 7 laws is the law of rhythm. And then you see rhythm in everything. You see that within nature there's this rhythm. Within your life there's a rhythm. Even within the so-called chaos, right? Which lends into the law of polarity in Hermeticism, where you have ebbs and flows within good and bad perceived in your life. But there's one of the fundamentals is this rhythm. And that rhythm, like if you look at it, it's in the sense of sound and all of that, cymatics and so forth and so on, you see that there's this rhythm within reality. And like you said, like if you look at there is that order, and then even in the detailed level, because there is that rhythm. Even in your most chaotic moment in your life, right, there's still a rhythm. And people will say, oh, that's insensitive. It's not insensitive. It's just saying that that's the way it is, because that's the law of rhythm. Rhythm is still within your life in the worst moments. When my parents died, there's still rhythm in that. There's still an order within that, and something is growing out of that and through that, and, so forth and so on. This is nature, right?
Yes.
Consciousness is animating the world, and that's what's happening. And people see, can you see it, right?
That's what I wanted to say. That like people who see that as a chaos in the detail, when you call it in the detail, then like you almost kind of choose to see that as chaos, because you are only seeing it from physical and mental state of consciousness, right?
Yeah.
But if you choose to see it in more higher level of perception, then even if you're in detail, that is not chaos. That's a part of the process of something bigger, right? So again, like you mentioned earlier, the sage, even in the detailed moment, the sages don't see that as a chaos. No. It's just part of just a bigger picture. That's all there is, right? But we choose to see that as chaos.
It's a dance of Shiva. It's a Nataraj, right? Do you see the Nataraj or not? Do you see that vibration, that rhythm moving through everything?
Right.
It's almost like an attunement, right? Like, so when you have that evolved state of perception, you're attuned to the channel, the signal. And most of us are like, like the TV that's we're a little bit distorted. We get a little flicker every now and again. Oh, I see the picture. Like you almost see the
play with the antenna.
Yeah. But how do we play with the antenna? We've got to do spiritual work, right? We've got to attune ourselves to the Brahman or to the Tao. We've got to attune our existence to then you can see the beauty, the aesthetic beauty in what others would term chaos, right? And people may think that's insensitive, but that's actually the evolved state of consciousness, right? And it's not that the sage or the enlightened person doesn't empathize or sympathize with the world. They do. But they understand that there's a greater totality and something much greater going on here than what us mere humans think, right, at a certain level. So they they don't see, like you said, chaos. They see it as rhythm, as order, as intrinsic harmony, because they're attuned. Their attunement is much higher than the average Joe. So
Yeah, definitely. I think we need to practice in our daily life to see it from a little bit of a distance. I think, even whatever you're going through, if you are in a pretty, not a good mood or something, and instead of dwelling in that like a bad mood, just keep a little bit of distance of your own feelings itself. Then things will be a little bit better, and you might feel better from it, and also you get to have a better understanding of yourself as well, I think. And that simple practice like that, I think for me personally, it helps a lot, because again, like that helps to see the bigger picture, even in your own individual life, right? And yeah, so I think it's very important.
Have you experienced pure seeing? See, that's the question. That's what a sage would say. Have you experienced pure seeing? Just seeing.
Yeah.
Not seeing with labels, with what's happening in front of you, but from pure seeing, what we would call pure awareness. Just from that state, you're purely aware and you purely just see. Have you ever experienced reality from that state? And most people will say no. Why? Because of the constructed reality within their mind, what we call Maya, which then superimposes a version of reality of what's going on. It's like when Alan Watts was sitting with that guru that time, and people in the street were going crazy. It must have been in India or somewhere like that. And they're going mad. And what's going on here? And then the guru's like, Shiva's coming on funny today, isn't it? Because he sees the reality he sees Shiva. He doesn't Shiva here being not two, right? Not two. He sees the non-dual reality. He sees what it is. Where Alan may have not, because he sees crazy guy on the street going mad and so forth and so on. Yeah, okay, it could be funny, whatever. But the idea is that the guru had that evolved state. He could see. He purely saw, right? And a lot of people, especially people who are attracted to identity politics and like shaming other people and so forth and so on, all of these new crowd, they would say, oh, that's very insensitive. It's insensitive to just see what's wrong with that. You know what's insensitive? To have an agenda, to cause violence, to cause conflict. That's insensitive. Yeah. That's insensitive.
Yeah, when you come from a certain agenda, you completely kind of ignoring the other side of picture, right? Because you purely believe your agenda is better and beneficial for everybody. But that's great illusion. We all know that. That itself is that's insensitive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have to come to that pure seeing, man. You have to come to see that it's all nirvana, like they say in Zen. It's all nirvana.
Yeah.
Have you came to that realization that it's all nirvana? So, like, you're trying to strive to achieve nirvana, but everything is nirvana, But you're not there because you're seeing from an egoic level, from a fragmented state of consciousness. It's like looking through, those light projections, and you see like 1,000, like a prism, right? And you see it. That's how people are looking. Whether you're not seeing the one single pure light, And so.
Yeah, and again, you told me about that book. I forgot the exact title, but in the book said that we were already enlightened, but we've forgotten.
Yeah, we've forgotten. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was Hubert Benoit, the supreme Zen, the supreme doctrine.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's the thing. We were already enlightened, but we've forgotten. Yeah. But that's in a lot of books. Maybe another book I might have mentioned to you as well. But that's the thing, right? So we're overcoming our own hypnosis through life. Where we talked about this earlier, with our nature being warped and everything. We're all overcoming our own hypnosis of duality, and we were already enlightened, right? Yeah. And that's what my book was about, right? Enlightenment Now is about that. We're already that, but we've gone through a process to think we're going to be someone or be that maybe, but that's not the case, right? So, and the greatest spiritual practice to enhance that understanding is to try to have that evolved state of perception and not get your mind entangled in the world. And then what happens is your mind the ego starts to naturally downregulate because it's starved of oxygen. If you starve anything of oxygen, what happens to it?
Dies.
If you're giving, the ego energy, its fuel is on drama, on separation, on duality. And if you're not fueling that, then it begins to subside. And that's all we have to do. We have to just starve it of oxygen. And once we starve it of oxygen and we keep this elevated perspective, then we start to see nature as it truly is.
It's easier said than done,
Easy.
always.
Always easier said than done. But I think that's a good place to stop there.
Yeah.
And we covered a lot. We even went into a little bit of the hidden life of Jesus, but we hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure you like, subscribe, drop a comment below about the content, and also don't forget to check out my Patreon or PayPal if you want to support the channel, or even the new merchandise that is out. There's probably new merchandise coming as well. And for those who celebrate Christmas, Guyang and I would like to say Merry Christmas to you. And if you don't celebrate Christmas, then have a great day, whatever. And this Wednesday, don't forget, I have a very important new documentary coming out. It's a short documentary, less than about 14 minutes. You said it's probably my best one so far, maybe. She believes. Well, I won't tell you what it is. I'm going to leave it a surprise for now. So make sure you check that out on Wednesday. Tune in. And we'll see you guys next week.